Portraying Samuel Carlson, we have Paul Leone, local storyteller and historian, interviewing Paul or Sam Carlson. We have Greg Peterson, another community stakeholder involved in many great things that we're doing today in Jamestown and beyond. So please welcome Paul and Greg.
Thanks for Don for inviting Greg and me. Thanks to Don for committing himself to all things Scandinavian. This sort of event requires that you willingly suspend your disbelief, because the way we're going to honor the memory of Samuel Carlson today is by simulating an interview of Sam when he has been retired from the mayoralty. So his last administration was 36-37. He retired at the end of 1937. Okay? Whoa. Is that better? Better? All right. So he retired after 26 years in the mayoralty. He was the mayor here for 26 years. And like John said, he was first elected in 1908. He was defeated for re-election twice over that time. But he retired after 26 years in the mayoralty. And he was honored with the designation Mayor Emeritus, which I'm not sure if there has ever been another Mayor Emeritus in this country since, but I know he was the first to have been given that title in honor of his contribution to the city of Jamestown. So what we're doing here is Greg is the interviewer and I'm Sam. And I will say that when Don first approached me to do this sort of thing, I had real reservations about it. The reason being that I'm pretty dark. It has been suggested to me that I resemble physically Sam Carlson. I rather don't believe that because I've studied his photographs, but I'm thinking maybe if I dyed my hair. Okay, so you suspend your disbelief. We're putting ourselves back into Sam's post-mayoralty. Looks like I lost it again. All right, whatever. Okay, I can speak loud enough, I suppose. We're putting ourselves back into the post-mayorality, which means after 1937, the end of 1937. So I'm thinking several years after 1937, and Sam is being interviewed by the local newspaper because he's a celebrity. He is a celebrity in this town, and he is honored. And the community is interested in him and what he has to say, and has been through his career as mayor of Jamestown.
Okay, I am Greg Peterson. I am a reporter for the Jamestown Journal. Been assigned specifically to have this unique opportunity to sit with this long-standing icon of the city of Jamestown, our senior citizen, the former mayor and mayor emeritus, Sam Carlson. So today is an interview which at some point will appear in the Jamestown Journal, so be sure to get your subscription before it gets merged with that thing called the Jamestown Post, because we'd never want to ever see it being seen as the Jamestown Post Journal. 3 cheers for the Jamestown Journal. So, Mr. Mayor, if I may, you're a native-born citizen of the Swedish immigrants. Can you tell me something of how your family decided to immigrate to the United States?
Well, sure. One can understand that at this period, post-Civil War, 1860s, maybe 40, 50 years before, and throughout history, actually, certainly in Sweden, but also in this country, the main occupation of folks was agriculture. And at the time that my parents emigrated, it was very difficult in Sweden to find any sort of employment other than agriculture. And finding a job in what were non-existent factories was nearly out of the question. There had been such a large emigration to America from Sweden beginning in the mid-19th century that those who came originally attracted more and more people. And that happened that the Swedes began to come to Jamestown in the mid-19th century. My parents had relatives here, and so it would be natural for them to come to the same community where they had some contacts. Now, it was very difficult. My parents were very poor. When they arrived here, they emigrated in 1867. I was born in 1868, a year later. My mother died when I was an infant, so that I never knew my mother, but my father remarried about 3 years after my mother died. So I had a stepmother who helped to raise me. Basically, it was an economic thing, which was the case for many immigrants, not only Swedes, but every immigrant coming to the land of opportunity here, America.
So you get here. Do you recall your earliest impressions of Jamestown, New York?
Surely, I can remember them very fondly, with a certain humor attached to them too, although it was quite a difficult time to make a living for my parents. I attended the old elementary school on Allen Street. Now, we lived naturally among the Swedes, and also among the English on what is still today called English Hill. I suppose everybody knows where that is and knows where Swede Hill is? Yes? So they are steep hills. And one can imagine in the wintertime, even today, negotiating those hills. So I was enrolled in the elementary school on Allen Street, below Swede Hill. And this was behind one of the major growing furniture factories in Jamestown, Jamestown Lounge. At the age of 10, because it was so difficult for my parents to make a living, I was removed from the school and placed to work in the alpaca mills. Jamestown was a growing and energetic community. I can remember that as a child, and it continues to be that. But the two major industries, the furniture and the textile industry, were growing and flourishing. It happened often that families were not able to make ends meet without the help of their children. And so I was placed in the alpaca mills, the Hall Worsted mills, the age of 10. Children then were working 10 and 12 hours a day in those mills. And, it helped out my parents. I was able to rise sort of within the organization and take on more important jobs. I always was able to manage finding work in Jamestown as a young man, both in the furniture business and in the textile business. I can remember in school, and this may be sort of shocking, that at the time, Professor Love, Samuel Love, was the superintendent of schools. Love School, obviously, named after Professor Love. Professor Love was a stern taskmaster. He made a point of visiting the elementary schools occasionally, back and forth among those schools. And when he came, he brought with him a ruler, because he was not averse to inflicting sort of whacks on the wrist or on the palms to those who are not performing as they should be. So I can well remember that. I could go on, but there are some other fond remembrances that, for instance, baseball. As a young man, and my compatriots were always very, very fond of baseball. Now, baseball was disallowed on school grounds. One was not allowed to play baseball on school grounds, nor was one able to play baseball on the Sabbath within the city limits. So what we did was remove ourselves outside of the city limits beyond what was going to be the Jamestown Reservoir at the peak of English Hill, and had our baseball games there, as I was pitcher. So I can remember that fondly, but looking back on it, I am seeing Jamestown as your stereotypical Victorian community, on the rise or on the decline, for better or for worse.
Speaking of remembrances, we remember you, Mr. Mayor, principally as a politician. There must have been a start point where your interest grabbed you and said, maybe public service is something I would like to do.
That certainly happened to me at quite a young age. I like to think of myself as an energetic young fella, able to find activities of interest throughout my young life, and obviously through my career as well. So first thing I did was I attended the old Lutheran church, joined the choir. 13 years old, they needed a tenor, that was me. At 14 years old, and this had a great influence on my life and my career, I joined the YMCA. I have been a member of the YMCA all my life and continue to be a member. Now, since I had missed a significant amount of schooling by the time I was 14, the YMCA had a wonderful library. And in that library, there were many volumes on city administration, public works, and that's where I got my first approach to my first look at the works of a city and my interest in being a part of the work of a city. So I credit the YMCA with stimulating a career in public service for me. And then I was always here and there in the community, quite visible, even as a young man. There was a sort of confraternity that met regularly in what was called the Hall Block on the Prendergast building at 3rd and Main. And this was called the Ethical Society. And the Ethical Society first had the intention of trying to establish a municipal power plant for lighting, for the street lights, the electricity for the street lights in the city. And I was as a young man, I made sure I attended those meetings, and I actually became the secretary of the meetings as a young man. And so it was early on that I was advocating for municipal control, municipal ownership of the generation of electricity. And by doing that, I was very, very visible in the community. I was writing many letters to the Journal, and so I had a visibility which encouraged me, which motivated me with the encouragement of some of the major players in the Ethical Society to run for alderman in 1893, and that's what I did.
Do you remember much about that campaign? What you had to do? Was it door to door? What was your technique?
Well, my interest in my platform was quite evident in the city, very evident. And all those Swedes on Swede Hill, well, at that time, the population of Jamestown was about 50% Swedish. And so I had so much encouragement to run that I decided, why, yes, I would. And my platform basically was to see what influence I could exert in establishing municipal ownership of electricity production here in Jamestown. Also, I had an interest in the water department becoming municipally owned as well, because that was also under the ownership of private enterprise out of Pittsburgh. So those two things. I can say that that there was much struggle and much opposition to municipal ownership of utilities, because the private interests were always looking for the bottom line and looking to have the rates at a certain place where they would be making lots of money. So there was a lot of opposition throughout my career to acquiring municipal ownership. Let me mention, after I was elected that first time, by 19 votes. Now, I don't know what the size of the electorate was at the time, but I only won that by 19 votes. And so I remember, as one of the immediate fights I had as a young alderman was over the paving of the city streets. John mentioned paving, because at the time there was no pavement. None of the streets were paved yet, and this one can relate and imagine the dust in the summer and the mud in the rainy season. And one can also imagine that the women in those days wearing these long dresses, crossing the street, having to pull the dress up and expose themselves. So this is typically Victorian. But in any case, there grew within the community a problem, a controversy over the paving, because certain contractors who were sort of, I won't say in the hand of, but sort of friendly with certain aldermen, were able to get the contracts for paving. And they were extremely lucrative contracts. And so as a young alderman in my first term, I proposed to the council that the city take over the paving and building of sewers. And this was adopted. And the contractors weren't happy. And the aldermen in support of the contractors weren't happy. But there was nothing much they could do about it until they decided, all right, we're going to try to change this work back to the way it was. And the council decided, because there was a lot of mention, a lot of talk within the city about how these contractors were fleecing the city. And so after my proposal, it was decided that the council would appoint a commission to investigate the collusion between the contractors and these aldermen. It happened that the commission brought legal proceedings against the contractors and the aldermen, which resulted in legal action, and the commission, the council that had at first allowed the commission, rescinded the allowance. The city brought legal action against the contractors and the councilmen, and actually tried to legally deny that the city had authority to assume the paving. So it happened that the commission was in they were in council trying to get together the evidence of the collusion at the same time that those in favor of returning the contracts to the way it were at City Hall in another meeting, exposed to each other. So for me, it required that the commission have enough time to get together the evidence against the council, against the aldermen and contractors in collusion. So I took it upon myself to filibuster the councilmen and contractors in meeting in order to give that commission enough time to raise their evidence. What I did was take the city charter and begin to read it. It was like Mr. Smith going to Washington, reading it interminably, and of course the contractors and the aldermen were quite angry about that. So much so that after I had been reading this charter for hours, they decided they were going to call the police on me. And they actually did. And the police came, and I welcomed the police. I eventually appointed as chief of police the son of that alderman who was so much against me, but I had authority according to the charter, I had authority within the community to to do this, to speak in front of this body, and they had no authority to deny that I speak. And the police understood this, and off they went. So that was the first sort of controversy, or the first sort of fight I had among many in my early years as alderman. I had many fights.
Then you decide at some point you're going to elevate yourself from being just one of many aldermen to being one of one as the mayor. What was your reasoning there?
Well, by that time, now that's 1908 when I ran for mayor for the first time. So I had been alderman for, well, let's see, 15, better than 15 years, and so I had been reelected for 2-year terms up until that time, and so I was well known in the community. And so I decided that this was the right time for me to make a bid for mayor. And Oscar Price was currently mayor, first mayor of Jamestown. He was once Jamestown became a city. Oscar Price was the first mayor, and he ran against me in that campaign, and everybody knew, the entire city knew where I stood on municipal ownership of utilities, and so my platform was to expand what was the generating plant in Jamestown at the time, which was a small plant, to expand it to increase the amount of electricity available for homes and businesses in the city. That was a major plank in my platform, as well as acquiring ownership of the water facilities in Jamestown, which were at that time owned by a company out of Pittsburgh. And the other thing that I was particularly aggressive about was insisting that my appointments and that city government would be run on a nonpartisan basis. In that the party politics would not influence my decisions. It would be the policy that would influence my decisions. And I was very, very, very aggressive in making that known in the community as I ran for mayor. Now, I was elected. So I was elected, and immediately there appeared before me, now I was elected as a Republican, but I deny that I ran on, I called myself a Lincoln Republican, which, who knows what that means. But I was a Lincoln Republican, and I took some hits in the newspaper about that too. But shortly after I was elected, here came the Republican establishment, the party leaders, to my office, handing me a slate of candidates they were looking for me to appoint to positions in the community. And I said, well, gentlemen, I will appoint on the basis of expertise and who I think might be the best person for the position, and I will not appoint I appoint on your recommendations simply because they are Republicans in this town. And of course, that rubbed them the wrong way too. So I've had all through my career problems with establishment politics. I have been called many things.
Well, how refreshing that you strayed away from the Governor Marcy to the victor the spoils mentality, but I'm sure that brought on enemies as well. But what was it that during this extensive time you were mayor, I mean literally except for one time in 1927, you were elected. And what did the citizenry see in you that made a difference?
They began to see improvements in their condition, particularly on taxation. Now, taxation is probably the issue, and it remains so today, over and beyond Samuel Carlson's career in politics. But taxation is an issue that will encourage, that will attract voters. But electricity rates declined, water rates declined during my before I became mayor, and I was very, very aggressive in insisting on enlarging the municipal electricity, and it rang a bell with the voters, and so they did elect me. Now, in that first election, in 1927, that I lost, Mr. Lars Larson, who succeeded me for a single term, he ran on the position, the policy that he could that at the time the state had the state had required that the city reassess the property in Jamestown. And as mayor, I had no authority to veto that from the state. So there had to be a reassessment, an upward reassessment. And so Mr. Larson campaigned against that state requirement. And the finger was pointed at me as being responsible for the reassessment. And so that had a lot to do with my defeat in that election. But not only that, there had been, prior to that, there had been a big fight over enlarging the municipal electric plant. Now, there's a very interesting history in that fight. Mr. Noah Goki, whose name many of you may remember, Mr. Noah Goki, industrialist in Jamestown, who owned a large shoe manufactory on 3rd Street. Very wealthy man, had a big mansion on Lakeview Avenue, big brick mansion. He also owned the small electrical generating plant in Jamestown at the time. After I was first elected as alderman, he approached me and told me, obviously I was advocating for municipal ownership. He approached me saying that, Sam, you can't do that. It's too hard, technically hard. Not many people can do this, can generate electricity, and it's communism. Municipal ownership is communism, is what he said. I said, well, Mr. Goki, now the city takes care of fire, the city takes care of police, city takes care of the school board, city can certainly take care of generating electricity. So Mr. Goki was my enemy from there on out. And what happened was that the city acquired an option to purchase the Goki plant. And Mr. Goki decided that it was time to unload his plant. And he decided he would sell the plant to the city. The city may buy the plant, and the price was $90,000. Of course, a large amount of money in those days. the city would buy the plant. But in the negotiations over the price and the sale, it turned out that before any agreement was reached, the plant was sold to the Jamestown Street Railway. They owned the rail service all around the lake within the city. And I hadn't known this until it was told to me after the fact. Turned out later that the railway bought the plant for the $90,000 asked. Turned around several years later, made a few improvements, and sold it to the Niagara Syndicate. Niagara generating electricity from the Niagara Falls turbines. They were a large electric concern, of course. And so the Jamestown Street Railway sold it to that Niagara Syndicate for $400,000. So they made a tidy profit. So then it was the year before the 1927 election, 1926. Mr. Corey, who was the president of the Niagara the Niagara concern, the Niagara electricity plant, the generating cooperative, Niagara, Lockport, and Ontario, large outfit. He came to my office in 1926. And understanding that I was advocating, and it would probably be the case, that the local generating plant would expand and cut into the profits of his company, he came with a proposition to me and to the city council about providing electricity through his plant to the city. It was quite an attractive proposition. Now, we were planning at the time to purchase equipment to expand the plant, and the price for that equipment was $300,000, which would greatly expand the capabilities of our local plant. So Mr. Corey came in and laid before me the proposition that he would be willing to sell to the city electricity, the amount of electricity that the local plant would be able to provide at the same price that the local facility would charge. He would do this for 10 years. I, of course, would not agree to that proposition, nor would the city council, because after the 10 years, it was obvious that what would happen would be that the Niagara concern would raise the prices on us. So I decided, and we decided, no, we were not going to accept that offer. Of course, that did not make Mr. Corey happy. And so Mr. Corey, after that refusal to accept his proposition, spent a lot of time in Jamestown speaking before groups about the advantages of his offer. And the advantages sounded extremely good. And so that certainly influenced the election in 1927, that and the fact of the reevaluation upward of the property in Jamestown.
So the private plant was really Goki to really a broadhead company, which was the Jamestown Traction, then to Niagara, Lockport, which became really ultimately Niagara Mohawk, and then you were not satisfied with that private situation, and Negotiations then ensued, and ultimately managed something that was quite extraordinary.
Yeah, exactly. And we did purchase the equipment, we did expand the plant, and the electorate could very easily see that the prices, our prices for selling electricity were the lowest, among the lowest, if not the lowest in the country. And so this, in case one needed further proof of the advantages of municipal ownership of utilities, it was right there. And so we continue to enlarge and expand the capabilities of the power plant, as well as the water distribution, the water ownership of the water and supplying water to the city. Also, we decided, well, this was part of my plank running for mayor as well in 1908, to build a city hospital, which became Jones Hill Hospital. One that didn't work out so well was acquiring the phone companies as a utility run by the city. That one didn't work out so well, but most of what we did, the electorate could see it was to the electorate's advantage. And Mr. Larson remained mayor only for that single term, that 2-year term, and the following election in 1929, I was reelected. The electorate knew what my policies were, and seemingly how they could see progress in the city. The city's streets were being paved, city hospital was being built, and so there was a lot of visible improvement in the city under my administrations, and so I was reelected there in 1929. And what happened then was Mr. Corey, realizing that since I was reelected, that indicated that my policies were going to continue. And so there would be opposition between our city generating electricity and the Niagara Syndicate generating the electricity. And so he decided to sell to us. He took into consideration the advice of his legal representation at the time, which was Robert Jackson, who obviously became a Supreme Court justice. And I'm very proud of Robert Jackson. He and I became colleagues. I was older than he, and I was the first to appoint the Supreme Court justice to a position, public position, legal position, as corporate counsel in Jamestown. So Robert and I didn't always agree on policy matters, but we liked each other and laughed a lot together.
Yeah, he turned out to be something okay. Rumor has it. 1933, shortly after the acquisition of Niagara and the municipal plant, you took a road show on behalf of learning more about municipalities, which included a trip to Europe and a visit with a guy named in Germany who became recently the Reichs Chancellor, a guy named Adolf Hitler. What was your impression of him?
Well, this was quite an interesting, and for me it was a wonderful trip. The trip was sponsored by what was called the Karl Schurz Foundation. Karl Schurz was a German immigrant. He had several positions in politics and social affairs in America. He was once the Interior Secretary. And he was an advocate of, he made a lot of money through law school and various other business interests. And he had an interest in trying to improve relations between America and Germany. Now, you can understand, this is Germany at 1933. There was a lot of going on in Germany, but he was a philanthropist, Mr. Schertz was. And so he financed a trip to Germany that to include a number, and if I'm remembering right, it was like 17 of us. I was the only mayor. 17 of us to go and travel through the communities, cities in Germany, and the folks in Germany who are the folks in Europe who are running things, and try and make cultural contacts as well as to take a look at how they administered their cities. And so I was there for a considerable amount of time, 6 weeks, and traveled among many of the countries in Germany. Got to visit my homeland, my parents' homeland, for the first time in Sweden. I thought it was the best run of all. Actually went to Russia as well. Now, Russia was run by the Bolsheviks at the time, and so learned a whole lot. But in Germany it was, and our group was warned. I mean, we took this trip across the ocean, of course, in a ocean liner. I fed the fish a lot. We were warned not to antagonize the Germans over what we obviously knew was the condition of Germany at the time, Hitler having recently become the chancellor. And so, of course, it was in Berlin with our group and our hosts there. We were in a large stadium, and our host there pointed out the chancellor in the distance. I was able to convince our host to introduce me to Adolf Hitler. And he actually did take me over, and there I was face to face with Adolf Hitler, and he said something to me to the effect, when you go home to America, tell them that you didn't find dead bodies in the street. Something to that effect. And so I obviously knew who he was, and the horrendous implications of his control of the country of Germany. When I came back, I came back in August of 1933, and so that was election year again, happened. That was the second of my 2 electoral defeats for mayor.
As we wrap up here, Mr. Mayor, and with an eye that I've got to meet a deadline so that the Jamestown Journal will always become the Jamestown Journal and not something other than that. So that what you would want the readers to appreciate as far as your legacy. What's the Sam Carlson legacy?
Well, I have a certain amount of pride in my career and the way I have been received by the citizens of Jamestown. And as far as what I believe to be my best accomplishments in the city, over and above all would be the establishment of municipal ownership of electricity, that as well as municipal ownership of water sales and distribution. Those two, and there were many, of course, other accomplishments, but the other thing was my insistence, my advocacy that the city be run on a nonpartisan basis, so that it wouldn't be the Democrats control the city or the Republicans control the city and have all the power. I insisted on minority representation in appointments, so that, for instance, when I won the first election in 1908, and so Oscar Price was defeated. He had been mayor for, I believe it was 4 terms, and he was defeated by me. I appointed him as city treasurer. So I would always appoint members of the opposite party into positions when I thought that their candidates, when the folks suggested to me for appointments, I considered to be the best possible candidate for the position. And so those 3 things, maybe, I hope that the community and history will remember me by.
On behalf of the citizenry of the city of Jamestown, and in honor of your 26 years as mayor, we applaud you and thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you. I'm going to retire to my Sweet Hill home, and I'm going to remain on the Board of Public Utilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you.